Good morning. Welcome to the OHSU Effect. I'm Lacey Evans. Today we're going to talk about clinical trials, and we're going to talk to two people who are on both sides of the trials, one as a doctor and one as a patient. Dr. Tom Baer is an internationally recognized prostate cancer expert at the Knight Cancer Institute at OHSU. He's been involved in nearly 100 clinical trials and has published over 250 articles and abstracts in his field. Dr. Larry Axmaker is semi-retired after a 45-year career that included teaching, counseling, and administration at all educational levels. He also had a private practice in clinical psychology and more than a dozen years of writing and editing and graphic art and health education and promotion. He was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2003 and has been a participant in several clinical trials. And the two recently wrote a book together entitled Cancer Clinical Trials, A Common Sense Guide to Experimental Cancer Therapies and Clinical Trials. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, Dr. Baer, let's start with you. What prompted the two of you to pursue this book?
You know, for me, I had been involved in a number of clinical trials and have talked to hundreds of men with prostate cancer about experimental therapy. And I have always had a nagging feeling that there's something missing in what we're telling them. There's a lot of background knowledge that I think patients with cancer, their families, their loved ones, really need to know to make good decisions for their care and to consider both standard and investigational therapies. And after a number of years of trying to do this in the clinic, I realized that we needed something more and decided a book would be a great way to do it.
Yeah, Dr. Axmaker, how did you get involved in writing the book?
Well, I'd written a book several years ago about prostate cancer and my experience with prostate cancer, and I'd given a copy of that to Tom, and he asked me if I would like to work with him in doing this.
What kind of questions do most patients have about clinical trials, Dr. Baer?
Well, you know, I think that the first question always is, how will this help me, and what are my options? You know, that's always the case. And then beyond that, the questions get very specific depending on the kind of clinical trial and the particular situation that each person living with cancer finds themselves in. We commonly hear questions about placebos. People are very concerned about the possibility that they might get a sugar pill and not a real drug. People want to know what they're getting. People want to understand what they're getting into. They ask about side effects and so forth. But there's a million questions on the whole.
Yeah, Larry, what kind of questions did you have the first time you participated in a trial? Were you nervous?
Yes, I was. I didn't know what would happen. I thought, why not? By the time that I had been diagnosed with cancer, and I knew I wouldn't be cured, then I thought, well, anything I do might help, and so it's worth a try. But I found that a lot of other people I know with cancer were more reluctant. They really didn't. They had questions. They didn't trust the process, and that's another reason that I was interested in the book, is just to make sure people have all the information to make the choices.
Are cancer clinical trials different than other drug trials?
Well, I think in some ways they certainly are. In other ways, of course, all of the studies have the same principles in common, that there's a new idea on how to treat a medical condition, and it's tested in an organized fashion following a single recipe in dozens, hundreds, or thousands of people living with that condition. I think cancer trials are unique in that often they are offered to patients who have few options remaining for the treatment of their cancer. So these are difficult times, stressful times. One of the reasons that we're excited about this book is that we hope to educate people with cancer about clinical trials early on in the course of their disease, before they find themselves in an extremely demanding and stressful situation. Cancer drugs can have more side effects. There's, if you think about it, when you treat patients for high blood pressure, those drugs tend to be pretty safe. There certainly can be side effects, no question about it. But some cancer drugs are downright dangerous, and so there's a lot to learn about cancer treatments.
Well, what should patients with cancer consider when making a decision to participate in a trial?
Well, I think that they really need to understand their disease and where they are and what their options are, first and foremost. Patients and physicians first need to focus on what is the best thing for that particular cancer patient. And it may be a clinical trial. It may be that there's excellent standard care available. So I would not leap to a clinical trial immediately just because one happens to be available. Understand the cancer, understand the options. That's the most important thing. Once somebody is at that point, then certainly there are lots of questions that we encourage people to ask about the trial itself. What are the drugs? What are the side effects? What are the potential benefits? What are the alternatives? Are there any costs involved that I might have to bear? And I'm sure Larry will have some other things to add to that initial list.
Well, yeah, Larry, I wanted to talk to you. You know, you're a cancer survivor. You participated in these clinical trials. How was the process going through making that decision to not only take part in the trial, but then what was your experience in the trial?
Well, in my case, the decision to take part, there is no treatment that's going to cure me, and so I'm looking at two things. One is maybe the trial medicine is going to help me, and if it doesn't, they'll find out and they'll be able to start on something else that might. The process, the first thing that I did in the process each time was talk to my wife and family and say, okay, here's the situation, here's my situation, here are the choices, and make sure that they're supportive. What I found in participating, that the people who were directing the trials were very, very helpful, very kind, very friendly, very helpful. So I never had any problem at all with that, and I could ask any question I wanted, and they would find an answer. And I checked things like, does my insurance cover this? And the good news is I'm on Medicare, and so they pretty much cover standard costs of clinical trials automatically, so that's not a problem. But that's one of the questions that a lot of people come up with. And my experience has been really good. None of the trials cured me or slowed down my cancer, but the experience was good, and the help was good, and it's led me onto other things that I can try in the future.
So it sounds really that you just want the patient to be comfortable, no surprises along the way, I guess, and just comfortable that they're participating in this.
Yeah, oncologists don't like surprises unless they're upside surprises.
Participants don't like surprises either.
Yeah. Well, Larry, did you have any surprises along the way that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, a couple of times there were some positive surprises. One of them was I was in a trial where there were a group of people, and it turned out that I developed some friendships in that group and became very supportive, and that's been a good thing. And there are sometimes surprises that are positive in trials.
Well, there's clinical trials take a long time to study and to get the drugs approved. Is this a problem that you see in cancer therapies as well, Dr. Baer?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think those of us that interact with people living with cancer every week, as I do, feel an enormous sense of urgency. We need progress, and we need that progress right now. I think that there's no question that the process is too slow, but it's not always as slow as its reputation. I'll bring up an example of a recent drug that we've been involved with called MDV-3100, which is a drug in prostate cancer that we in Memorial Sloan Kettering and University of Washington started studying in patients for the very first time about 2.5 years ago. Prior to that, only mice had tried it. And the randomized phase 3 results, which is sort of the definitive test that leads to approval, were announced last November, and the drug significantly improved survival. So 2.5 years from roughly, it might have been almost 3, I'd have to look back at my calendar, from the very first pill in a human being to an international over 1,000-patient study with results ready to go to the FDA. We've also seen the FDA, once they get the data, approve drugs within 3 or 4 months sometimes. So, we would like it today, no question about it, and the faster the better. But it doesn't always take forever. When there's an exciting drug that offers potentially a compelling advantage, everyone comes together to move as quickly as possible.
Well, I have a lot more questions for you guys, but we're out of time. So can you stick around for the next segment?
It'd be our pleasure.
Okay. Dr. Larry Axemaker, he's semi-retired. He's actually joining us from Palm Springs this morning. We're a little jealous, but he's been on the patient side of clinical trials. And Dr. Tom Baer, who is a prostate cancer expert at the Knight Cancer Institute, of course, on the other side of the trials, with me this morning on the OHSU Effect. They'll be back with us in 5 minutes here on FM News 101 KXL.